Topeka State Hospital, which was formerly known as Topeka Insane Asylum, opened in 1879. In the late 1800s and the earlier 1900s, mental hospitals were largely unregulated, and like many other similar facilities of the time, patients faced abuse and poor living conditions. Many patients were restrained for long periods of time. It was reported that one patient's skin started to grow over the shackles. One of the most controversial practices at the hospital were the forced sterilization of patients. In 1913, Kansas passed a sterilization law directed at habitual criminals, the insane, as well as others deemed undesirable to society. From 1917 to 1936, there were 516 forced sterilizations at Topeka State Hospital. By the 1950s, this practice would end. The hospital was also understaffed for the patient population. Some patients were not even evaluated for mental illness. In 1951, a Danish immigrant named John Crabbe was wrongly incarcerated because it was found out that he was not actually mentally ill. In 1948, a panel was created to improve conditions at the hospital, as well as increased funding. Conditions would improve in the later half of the 1900s, and by the 1960s, Topeka State Hospital would become a better-than-average mental treatment facility. The Menninger Foundation would assist in evaluating incoming patients, as well as set up a psychology department and a fully accredited training program there. The facility became more of a treatment center than just a place to lock people up. Recreational activities were encouraged more now, and social workers were hired to reintroduce some patients back into society. New medications also were effective in improving patients' lives inside and outside of the hospital. However, after all these improvements, the facility would lose federal accreditation in 1988 for Medicare and Medicaid payments. At that time, that accounted for about 70% of the revenue. A few years later, in 1992, a therapist named Stephanie Ulrich and another therapist were taking some patients to see a movie. When they got back to the hospital, one of the patients, named Kenneth Waddell, would then go on to strangle her to death. This particular patient was formerly in a unit for potentially violent patients until budget cuts shut that unit down. He was a schizophrenic who had a previous violent criminal record. He would be sentenced to life in prison. In 1997, the hospital would close down due to lack of funds and privately owned mental programs gaining in popularity. By 2010, most of the complex was demolished. Today, 5 buildings still stand. In 1951, the juvenile department opened, and we will show you what's left of that in part 2 for next week.
So we're actually here at the main entrance / lobby. I don't know if you call this a lobby. Check-in, maybe? There's a lot of glass here. The glass is obviously not down.
So I guess where you would have walked up to the front here to talk to the receptionist or whoever, looks like.
Showing this is kind of like the...
We got a cool staircase right here.
Like an entrance, kind of pretty interesting stuff. Let's show them the... That's actually pretty cool. So over here is where they would keep their, says belly chains, leg irons. So this would be where they would keep like the restraints, the chains, the handcuffs, so all the different stuff like that. Of course, none of it's here still, but
Get that.
I don't know if you guys can see that. That's what those labels say. So I'm assuming over here you had keys lined up.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And over here we have, I don't know, some kind of alarm system. It's trouble.
And I'm assuming that will flash, and then maybe you could like reset the alarm, and maybe you could press, I don't know, where we're at.
Or it might be flashing like wherever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wherever the issue is, that's very cool.
And then here we'll walk into the this part. Sewing supplies there, rule books down in that drawer. And then just down this hallway, it's more empty rooms, nothing too crazy to see. But as you can see on this floor, there's a little more damage than like the other floors. The paint's all peeling off.
Well, everything's broken. I don't know if they go up there, but I used to go up to the park all the time.
Looks like we have an old ice machine, I think. That's what this is, I believe. Alright, so here's the last floor right here. Just got a few rooms. Nothing's in them or anything. It's in pretty good shape, this whole building, like the interior, at least for how old it is. Not a ton of vandalism. I mean, there's graffiti, of course, but people haven't like destroyed walls or anything like that happens in a lot of other places.
The building seems to be like structurally pretty safe as well.
Yeah.